All right, welcome to tonight's lecture. And it shouldn't be too hard because you already know your amendments for the most part, so I will try to be as brief as possible, but it is important to know how they relate to your rights in the criminal justice system. And the Fifth, Sixth, Seventh, and Eighth Amendments concern the protections of rights in the judicial process. These amendments were designed to ensure that the justice system neither abused fundamental liberties nor punished innocent people under the pretext of preserving law and order. And you can see the learning targets is I can look at current criminal cases and assess the constitutionality, trace the steps and procedures of the criminal process, and explain the importance of the jury system. The Fifth Amendment, you're knowing your rights when accused of a crime, and the Fifth Amendment has quite a bit to it. We have the self-incrimination, protects individuals from saying anything that might imply their own guilt, and of course we looked at the Miranda versus Arizona case, and the ban on self-incrimination was meant to prevent law enforcement officials from pressuring suspects into admitting guilt for a crime they did not commit. And obviously now today we have the Miranda rights. Double jeopardy, you cannot be tried for the same crime twice. That's pretty self-explanatory, and you've already heard a little bit about that. And the due process clause is no one may be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Another part of the Fifth Amendment that we've talked about is the takings clause or eminent domain, so that your property cannot be taken from you without just compensation or a fair price. And Sixth Amendment, again, your right to a fair trial, and that has the Gideon versus Wainwright, where everyone has a right to an attorney. So protecting citizens from the government by protecting the rights of the accused by explaining how criminal trials should be conducted, and trials must be quick, public, and you must be able to have an impartial jury. And the Sixth Amendment also has, as we said, an impartial jury. So you have your jurors, and we're going to do the voir dire process when looking at the mock trial. And typically you would have about 12 people. Sometimes you might have less. And their requirements are pretty simple. Typical jury would have someone that must be at least, or you must be a U.S. citizen, 18 years of age, able to understand English, a resident within the court's jurisdiction, and not a convicted felon. My wife got called a jury duty one time, but we were moving before that time occurred, so we were then in a different county, so she ended up not having to serve. And I've only served, I only went in one time, and it wasn't too bad, but I ended up going in the summertime and went in there, but I didn't end up getting called on that case either. So it's pretty common that you get called once in a while, at least once during your lifetime, and I'm sure you know somebody that's been called a jury. It's really not too bad. And then the key role of citizens, again, for the jurors, is that jurors are usually selected from voter registrations lists. So anytime you register to vote, or when you get your driver's license, could even be from telephone directories and utility company lists. So it kind of depends on the state. Ours is from Minnesota has it from your license and from voter registration lists. So don't be afraid to vote or get your license just because you don't want to be in a jury. Again, it's not too bad at all. During a jury process, of course, the jury would have to find a person guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And so after both the prosecution and defense attorneys have presented their final arguments, the case is handed over to the jury. The jury then retires to the jury room to deliberate behind closed doors. First thing the members of a jury typically does is choose a foreman to act as the chairperson. They then discuss all aspects of the case, including the court procedures, testimony, and evidence. Jurors may also request additional information from the judge if they are uncertain about anything. Following these procedures, most jurors are able to reach a verdict quickly, often in less than 2 hours, actually. And that would be if you find them guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. There has to be a unanimous decision, which is third there. You have to reach a unanimous decision. If you have somebody holding out, you have to wait until they come to your side, or everyone else has to go to that side. Then the jury foreperson announces the verdict to the judge. The Eighth Amendment, again, one of the classic amendments that you probably remember, is the cruel and unusual one. So it protects people in the criminal justice system from excessive bail or fines or cruel and unusual punishment. The case to remember in this one is Gregg v. Georgia. And by the way, anytime I've mentioned cases like Gideon or Miranda or like Gregg v. Georgia, please make sure to make a little note of it because it's possible you'll see those cases again. Again, I don't put stuff on here that you don't need. I try to put the stuff in here that makes sense for you to do well on the exams and on the finals. So the case that's most familiar with the Eighth Amendment is Gregg v. Georgia because after the death penalty was ruled unconstitutional for a little bit, Gregg v. Georgia in fact concluded that the death penalty, if applied correctly, was constitutional. So that's why some states are able to have the death penalty. The Fourth Amendment, again, the Search and Seizure Amendment, designed to protect the privacy and property rights of citizens from abuses by law enforcement. We've talked a ton about this. And the case I'd like you to remember here is the Cots versus United States, and that's the phone booth one where the government tapped the phone booth that he was having a conversation on, and they ruled that that was unconstitutional. So it's just one of those cases that protects us from unreasonable searches and seizures. Also, out of this came the exclusionary rule, which we also talked with Mapp v. Ohio, but the exclusionary rule just means that seizing evidence illegally cannot be used in court. And that is the end of this lecture. Have a good night.